Hello, my name is Jose Luis, and for this genealogy project, um, the questions that I'm going to be covering are um, how far did I trace myself back, and what are some challenges and setbacks that I had along the way. First of all, I'll start off the first question. How far was I able to trace back to my family? And it was honestly very tough tracing back my family because not much about them. But I was able to trace back all the way back to my great great grandmother on my mother's side, who was alive during the 1920s. That's around the time she was born, I believe. And that's as far as back as I was able to get because I didn't have any prior knowledge of anybody, before her or any resources that allowed me, to find anybody else. Um, I believe her name was Hertrude, or my family called her Tula, in kind of as a nickname because her name wasn't too easy to pronounce, that sort of thing. And that was on my mother's side. On my father's side, I was only able to trace it back to my great grandmother as well, because my great grandfather, I believe he died early on, so there's not much known about him and what sort of things he did. So I've only have limited knowledge of who he was, but I guess I'm not counting him simply because there's not much to know about him, or there's no documents, resources that really even show me what he looked like. So that's, I guess, one of the hardest setbacks. And moving on, and I guess the other question kind of ties into the setbacks and challenges that I had mostly with tracing back to my family, is that one of the biggest setbacks was that there was no documentation. For the most part, my family comes from an area which was, very poor, so there wasn't much education for many of them. So reading and writing wasn't something that a lot of people had back in the day, at least. Now it's different, of course. But back in the day, there was very little documentation, no diaries, no, birth certificates, nothing of the sort, which, would allow me to look back even further. And I think that would be the biggest setback that I ran into along the way doing my research. The other setback that I had was that, a lot of people actually died at a very young age. Because in that, as I stated earlier, it was a very poor area, so healthcare, health wasn't, the best there. So a lot of people died before, with and were forgotten about, really. And as well as, they took a lot of knowledge. When they died early on, they would also take a lot of knowledge about their ancestors along with themselves, and, it'd be lost in time. And I believe the other setback, which I guess would also be a setback, was the fact that my family was never really interested in documenting, our own family's history. So there's no, nobody really, went out of their way to, document it. Like, for example, in Ancestry.com, I was unable to find anything because, nobody else prior to myself had even attempted, to, like, record our family's history. Especially, as I stated earlier, there was a very poor area, so there was no technology, there was just simply no way to trace it back through means like Ancestry.com because they just simply wasn't there. It's kind of I think that the fact that my family came from a very poor area kind of really affected the research because I simply couldn't, find them because they were pretty much non-existent, and, because there weren't any documents or anything for that matter. And so, yeah, it was very tough for the most part, but I did, I kind of had to rely more on first-hand accounts and secondary accounts, mostly stories that people told me, like my family members.